Hi, Camille and the Studio Bird Brindle here with a tutorial this time on how to make this little triangle book. And this is a book that I have in my shop, in my Etsy shop. And I call it a little inspiration book because on each of the pages there's a different word. And you can open this book up and hang it. There's a little bead. So you can open it up and hang it so each one of those could be displayed. Or you can just make it and have it just as a book without the closure and the hanger. So I have this book as a pattern on my shop, and that comes with the illustrated directions for how to make a triangle book. I tried to give people a lot of flexibility with this pattern. So I have here a blank pattern where you could add your own pictures, photographs, or paintings, and then your own words or poetry. And then I created just a blank one if you just want to add words. And then there is my version, which has the words that I've picked out for it. So you can check that out in my shop if you like, but you can also make this book just by following the measurements that I'll put down below, and use your own handmade papers or maybe a decorative paper. So let's begin. To start out, I want to just cover some of the things that you're going to need. You're going to need a piece of board and then paper to cover it, as well as paper for the book. And like I said, you can use my pattern or you can use the measurements below in your own paper. I like to use PVA, but you can also use a glue stick. You're going to need something to cut things out with, whether that's your handy dandy craft knife that I have been using forever, or you could use a X-Acto blade, or you could use a pair of scissors. And I like to use a Teflon folder, but you're free to use a Teflon or a bone folder, just depending on what your preferences are. So let's go ahead and start. And to start, I thought I'd cover some of the issues that I had with the triangular cover. A triangular cover has a right angle, which is what we normally have in a square book cover. You can see that if we were going to be covering this board. That's the same. So we can go ahead and cut it the way that we normally cut it to do turn-ins on a traditional right angle cover. But the two other angles are acute angles. And I kind of messed around with trying to figure out how I would cut those so that they wouldn't overlap, and just finally came to the conclusion with this kind of a thin paper that I think that we can just go ahead and try this technique that I used. So to start out, let's go ahead and just put the cover onto the piece of the paper that we're going to use for the cover. And I'm just using some PVA. And now we're ready to go ahead and cut the edges so that the turn-ins lay nice and flat. And we know that this is a right angle, so we can go ahead and cut it the way we normally do. So we're just going to cut across here. And if you're unfamiliar how to do that, I cover that a little bit more detail in some of my other tutorials. Now we're ready to do these two acute angles, and you can see here that it's not going to quite work if we just cut it straight across. So here's what I did. I flipped the turn-in like I was going to turn it in, and then where it met the bottom, I just creased it with my fingernail. You could use a fingernail or you could use a bone folder. And I did that on both sides. So I'm basically marking where that lays when the turnover is done, when I turn them in. And we'll do that to the bottom as well. Now we end up with creases where those edges are going to come to the board. And I just go ahead and trim those off. Use those as guides and trim those off. So now we have all of the corners cut, and then you just do the turn-ins like you normally would. And you can see how this one just lays nice and flat and there's no overlap. That's like how we normally do a book cover with a square or rectangle. And that looks great. The bottom part, there's going to be a little overlap, but I don't think it really hurts with this paper that we're using. So we're just going to turn that in, and you can see how nice and neat that is on the corners. So you want to do that to both of your book covers. And if you choose to add the thread, to add the hanger and the closure, you're going to want to glue those onto your book. So you'll want to flatten the linen thread with your fingernail and glue those nice and flat, and then put one on each of the 4 edges. And I did this in advance so that it dries, so when we do the case in, it's not going to be jumping all over like it did in the last video. So we're ready to fold the text block, and to do that we're going to be taking these sheets of paper, and in my pattern you'll notice that there is 9 pages. So there's 9 of these sheets of paper, and like I said, I'll put the measurements below, but these are just 4-inch squares. And to do this, it's real simple. I kind of got this idea, like I said, from the fortune telling books, where you open and close the little pockets to get the fortune. It's just a variation on that. I think it's nice to have those windows, and it gives a little bit more pop to each of the pages. It's not hard to fold, and it makes for a nice opening when you have the whole book together. So let's just see how we fold each of those. We're going to start out by taking the words facing you, and we're just going to fold it in half diagonally in both directions. Then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to fold it in half. Now when we fold it in half, I'm going to leave it folded in half for the last fold. So we folded it in half both directions, and I've left it folded. Now the reason I did this is because the next fold that we're going to make is we're going to be folding the corners up to that middle fold, and I find if that middle fold is folded, you can more easily see where that is in connection to it. We don't want to have this corner fold go over that middle fold, because then it makes it difficult for the book pages to open and close. It kind of gets in the way. So we want to do this for all 4 of the corners, bringing them to that center fold. And it doesn't matter if you don't come all the way to the center. That's okay. You just don't want to go over this middle fold and have anything overlapping and laying outside there. So like I was saying, with that whole idea of a fortune, there is a little pattern that children used to fold, and it had the idea of it was like a fortune, and you would open it up and then open the flaps and see what your fortune was, and that's kind of what inspired me on this. So here then we fold each of the tips back to the fold, and we're just kind of revealing that word inside, just like those little fortune folding things of youth. Okay, so there's our page, and you want to do that to all 9 of them. So you should have 9 of them, and I suggest in my directions that you line them up so that you can see that all of the words are in the order that you want, as well as that all the words are facing right side up. So I have gone ahead and put together the text block of the other pages, and I'm just going to show you the last few pages to complete the text block. So we'll start out by putting glue onto the text block that we've already glued together, the other pages. And then we're just going to take this page, make sure it's right side up, make sure this is right side up, yep. And we're just going to lay it on top. I find that there's kind of a amount of glue that's just the right amount that allows you to adjust a little bit and is not so sticky that you can move it if you need to move it a hair. And go ahead and press all of that. And now we're ready to case in. So here we have our book cover. And we're just going to, let's get that situated here. There we go. So when we case in, we need to make sure, if you're using the hanger, that you've got the words facing the right directions. And to have it so that the book opens well, you want to line up the text block, the long edge of the text block, with the long edge of the cover. So I'm just putting glue on it, and we will line that up there with the edge. So we want to line this up with this edge, and that ensures that you can open it up in there. And then we'll just do the other side. And there you have it. So, a triangle book. If you're finishing out with the closure, you'll want to just slide a bead onto that and tie a knot so that that bead can go up and down. As you can see here, that bead closes, or that bead can be used to hold it open. There you have it, a little triangle book. I hope you get a chance to make some books this week, this month, or at least to do something creative. I know that it is really enriching for me and helpful and enjoyable. So I hope you find that too. And you can check out more of my patterns on my Etsy shop. And from Brindle and from me, thanks for watching.